Hello again to another Comic Talk episode. So today is a little bit off schedule. I was working on what I was thinking was going to be the next episode, and I didn't quite feel confident in putting it together yet. Then I happened to be walking through a local Dollar Tree, and I found something that sparked an idea in my head. So, as a child of the 90s, or the 80s and 90s, I was absolutely inundated with comic books. It was the dark age of comics, which you would think would be like a downturn for the medium, but in fact, it was dark because there was just a flood. It was like the video game crash in 1983. Early 90s, so many comic book titles because of the speculators market that everything was just a deluge. And one of the things that really worked in favor of the companies publishing these comic books was that there wasn't the internet. So you didn't get to spam people constantly with advertisements on websites or, shower them with Facebook ads or spam emails. You couldn't get people's attention in the same way that you do now. So one of the things that used to be used a lot was comic books. There was a point even in the 80s where if you watch another channel called Toy Galaxy, well, formerly Toy Galaxy, it's now called Secret Galaxy because they've kind of made a shift in the content that they're creating. You still have to look it up under Toy Galaxy, though YouTube hasn't allowed them to change the name as of the recording of this video. But on Toy Galaxy, Dan Larson talks about this triad of 80s marketing. You had a toy, a comic, and a TV show. So, as this is Comic Talk, you know which point of the triangle we're talking about here. Comics as advertisements for another product are kind of a weird niche in that genre. It's like with Batman, Black Adam, Spider-Man. The comic books had their own continuity established well before advertising was allowed to be as voracious as it is now, or was in the 90s, where you could slap a toy onto any idea or subject or topic that you ever came up with. So they stayed independent of all of the different children's media that existed at the time. You really couldn't have a correspondence between, the 3 points of that triad: a cartoon, a toy, and a comic book. 80s changed all that, and we got a side product of that thing was what I call insert comics. These are comics that are either created specifically for the purpose of moving a toy, or were included in other products as, an established brand. So things like we've got these mini comics from DC, the Justice League. These came as inserts in, I believe, General Mills cereals? Someone will correct me on that, I'm sure. Cereal product. Get you to buy cereal by putting a comic in it. And, obviously it worked. I bought 2 boxes. Another one is putting comics into activity sets of other types. IDW, one of my favorite independent comics publishers, got a license for My Little Pony comics, and they slapped this brand on everything. So there was a whole set put into Walmart's back when my daughter was smaller and My Little Pony was her everything. They put these into activity sets. And, she wasn't quite old enough to read the activity sets, so, the collector and me, I snagged these. And inserts into DVDs. We've got a full series of Pokemon comics that were tucked into the original release English DVDs for Pokemon. Now, some of these comics are original content created specifically for the thing that they were meant to sell. Those Justice League comics were. From Dark Horse, this sadly very beat up Aliens comic was published with Aliens toys to try and get them to move. I was not a very kind child to my comics collection. I have since grown much more protective. Another example of a comic created specifically for content, a long forgotten toy series by most people. So the Dino Riders. Now I've had to cobble together because I actually had so many of these things as a kid that I started cutting them up to like use the artwork as logos on other things. So this one had its cover. This one was the complete comic sans the cover. So to be able to pass on to posterity the knowledge of Dino Riders, I have one full comic here. But that is not its original cover. Others were, these were also DVD inserts. These came with the Spider-Man movies. The original run, not the new MCU ones. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And these are shrunk down so that you don't mistake them for the original print of the comics. The Pokemon ones, I thought it was real interesting. They were reformatted. So these are half of the original issue of the title that's done here. So it says number 8 of the Electric Tale of Pikachu. There's actually only 4 issues of the Electric Tale of Pikachu. These mini comics were reformatted so that each issue took up half, or each one of these took up half of the original comic. And then Pikachu Shocks Back, they went up to 8 on that one as well. And then it rolls over into the next 4-part series, which was Electric Pikachu Boogaloo. And you could collect these by buying each of the individual DVDs back when we did things like that. The insanity of it. And the comic that started all of this was just such a blatantly obvious abuse of this idea of comics selling other media. When I was in Dollar Store, I found this, and I kept it intentionally out of the focus here in that bright spot on the lighting there. This was a comic on the shelves highlighting this new toy line that Dollar Tree has, the Final Faction. They're like a rip-off G.I. Joe. I love how they went so far as to like try and make this look as legitimately published as possible. It's number 1, February 2022. First edition. They've got it in this fancy plastic wrap. They even promise an issue 2 on the back here. And they sell this thing for $1. I highly doubt any of the material in this thing is worth $1. But it serves as the lore and the world building, as you see right here, the origin story of Final Faction. And that was the point of insert comics a lot of the time, was to build the lore around a product. And sometimes insert comics or at times special mini-series runs, like Marvel did a lot of them back in the 80s, were created just to do world building for a new toy line. There's a lot of them that are out there that are just one shot, either one issue or maybe like 4-issue miniseries that were created just to sell a toy. Especially when animation budget was outside the scope of the company making said toy. If they couldn't afford to animate a cartoon or purchase animation from another studio to make a cartoon for it, they relied very heavily on printing lore comics that went with the toy line. And seeing that at the dollar store just brought back a wave of nostalgia of just like how gullible I was as a child. This stuff worked on me. And I mean, even like these two. These, I laughed my tail off because, you know, having seen this, I noticed these at my local Walmart. These are McFarlane toys. One of the big names in action figure production right now. I have a McFarlane Toys Sisters of Battle action figure from Warhammer 40k up in my study at this very moment. And to see these with these special comics that were printed just for this purpose, they're meant to get kids into the DC universe. Even notice down here, it says 6+. 6+. The majority of Batman storylines are not 6+. They are not appropriate for children under the age of 13. A whole hell of a lot of the storylines aren't appropriate for children under the age of 13. So you can bet these comics are special edition, or not special edition, but special publication comics that have been dumbed down specifically to draw in a younger audience and introduce them to the world of DC Comics. And of course, to other DC paraphernalia like DC action figures, pillowcases, toys, or not toys, that's what we've been talking about. But everything else that goes along with being a comic fan. Having those window curtains and that cup and the plates and the forks and everything else that they brand with superhero iconography or, military iconography, or even just, your favorite fantasy world iconography. And you can't even escape it in other countries. I just wanted to tag this one in at the very end here. Japan is notorious for doing this as well. They'll have... Alright, I don't want to say notorious. Back that up. They are known for doing this as well, where they put in manga that are just there to promote something. Like, they use characters from manga to promote everything over there. They use it to sell tissue paper, to sell toilet scrubbers. I mean, anything you can imagine. They use the same style of comic advertisement to move product. And just people don't really realize that this is a major part of the comics publishing industry. Like, you look at the number of ads in an actual edition of, an actual published comic book. You find so many ads, sometimes for the competition. I can't tell you how many times a product that has DC labeling in it is in an old 90s edition comic of, say, Spider-Man or Captain America that I own. And I go through and I see it and I'm like, wait a minute, that's a Batman video game, or that's the Batman movie. What in the heck is that doing in a Marvel comic? But, I mean, they didn't care. It moved product, it made dollars. And that's what these were for. But they hold kind of an interesting place to me, because a lot of them, because they're not part of the main continuity of a comic book, are outliers. There's weird stuff in them. A lot of them aren't canon. You get a lot of experimentation in these things that you wouldn't see in other comics. So I just wanted to kind of make people aware of them and show them off. I've also found some Disney ones, but they weren't really tied into any other product other than to be like, hey, it's a comic book with Mickey Mouse on it. Because Disney has their own publishing company now. They've got Marvel. They could publish, Mickey Mouse comics through the Marvel label and make a killing on the money. These were done by a small publisher called Peachtree. And I was just like, oh, that's an insert style comic where it's a product made to, promote lore or to pull in dollars off of the fact that it's got Mickey Mouse's face on it. So this is the world of insert comics. This has been a somewhat shorter episode, but it was a quick one that I just wanted to get off my chest and talk about, because these absolutely influenced purchasing decisions I had when I was a kid. I guarantee you that I wanted to collect every issue of this comic. It drove me to try and buy all of the Aliens toys, even if I didn't like all of the Aliens action figures. Some of the Aliens I thought just looked gross and I didn't want to collect them. But they all had the comic in them. And I had to have every issue. So, that's what insert comics are. I hope that has broadened the horizon of some of you and, kind of tickled the nostalgia fancy of the rest of you. And that's it for tonight. Bye.